Not hot, just warmed. Like it had been sitting in someone's palm a long time. Before it slipped away, it lay on the lobby tile, between the mailboxes and the potted plant that never grew. A little key, old-fashioned, with shallow teeth and a soft shine where countless fingers had rubbed it smooth. It was tied to a faded blue ribbon, the kind of ribbon you'd see on a kid's first place medal or on a gift nobody expected to receive. I crouched and picked it up, and the building made one of its familiar sounds, pipes clicking and elevator cable humming, the distant cough of someone who wouldn't go to a doctor. Above me, the hallway smelled like rain-soaked coats and burnt toast. I turned a key over in my hand, instinctively checking for a number. Most people here had modern codes, apps, new ways to keep old lives locked up. But this key belonged to something older, something someone didn't want to replace. I stood by the mailboxes and watched the lobby doors. Glass reflect my own face. 38, maybe 40, if you believe the lines under my eyes. A maintenance uniform that never quite looked clean, no matter how many times I washed it. A name patch that said Martin, even though nobody used it anymore. Hey, a voice said from behind me. I turned. Nora from 3B stood just inside the lobby, holding her tote bag like it weighed too much. Her hair was pulled back, but loose strands had escaped and clung to her cheek. Her eyes looked past me for a second, like she was checking whether anyone else was there. Then her gaze landed on the ribbon in my hand. Her face changed in a way that was almost invisible. But I saw it, because when you fix things for a living, you get used to noticing small breaks. Where did you? She started and stopped. Her throat moved, swallowing something. I lifted the key a little, found it by the mailboxes. Nora's fingers tightened on the tote strap. Can I? She didn't finish the question. She didn't have to. I stepped forward to hand it over, and she flinched. Not like she was afraid of me, like she was afraid of what the key meant. She took it anyway, careful, like it might cut her. Thank you, she said. Her voice was steady. Too steady. Then she turned, walked toward the stairs instead of the elevator, and disappeared upward without looking back. I stood in the lobby a moment longer, staring at the space she left behind, like the air still remembered her. In my pocket, my phone buzzed with a maintenance request. Unit 5D heat not working again. I didn't move because, for reasons I couldn't name yet, I had the feeling that key hadn't been lost by accident, and I had the feeling that if I let it go without understanding it, I'd miss the only chance I had to fix something that wasn't made of metal. My job is simple, on paper: keep the building standing, fix the things that break before they become disasters. Patch, tighten, replace, unclogged, reset. Tell the landlord what he doesn't want to hear, in a way that makes him think it was his idea. In a building like this, you learn to live inside other people's lives without ever belonging to them. You know who cries in the laundry room because they think the spin cycle will drown it out. You know who cooks at 2 a.m. because their shift ends when the rest of the world sleeps. You know whose footsteps are heavy with anger and whose footsteps are heavy with grief. And you learn to look away at the right times, not because you don't care, because privacy is sometimes the only dignity people can afford. When I first started at Harrogate Apartments, 10 floors to elevators, one trash chute that loved to clog, everybody was new to me: faces, names, doors, a maze of locks and habits. Now, 3 years later, I could walk the hallways in the dark and know where I was just by the smell. 2nd floor, lemon cleaner and dog shampoo. 4th floor, curry and incense. 7th floor, a sharp chemical scent from the nurse who sanitized her hands. The world was always one touch away from falling apart. And 3rd floor, smelled like old books and something faintly sweet, like vanilla left too long in a drawer. That was Nora. Nora in 3B was the kind of tenant landlords liked because she was quiet, paid on time, didn't complain unless something was actually broken, didn't throw parties, didn't cause trouble. But quiet doesn't mean simple. Quiet can mean you've learned not to ask for things. The first time I met her, she had opened her door just a few inches, chain still on when I knocked, about a water stain spreading across the ceiling of 2B. I'm Martin, I'd said, holding up my toolbox like proof I belong there. Maintenance, I need to check your bathroom. Her eyes had flicked behind me down the hall, like she expected someone to appear. Then she unlatched the chain and let me in. Her apartment was careful. Not staged, not cold. Just arranged with a kind of precision that told you she wanted control over something. In a world that didn't offer much, a single mug drying on the rack, a folded dish towel, shoes lined perfectly by the door, a bookshelf with worn spines, all organized by height, not by author. In the bathroom, I found the leak. An old pipe joint that had loosened. I fixed it in 10 minutes when I turned around. Nora was still standing in the doorway, arms crossed, watching me work, like she was trying to understand how someone could fix something so simply. All set, I said, wiping my hands. Thank you, she replied. I waited because people sometimes talk after a fix. They vent, they joke. They ask how your day is going. Nora didn't, she just looked at the pipe. Then at me, then said, sorry for the trouble that stuck with me. Most people didn't apologize when something in the building failed them. But Nora did, like she'd been trained to believe. Needing help was an inconvenience she had to pay for with guilt. After that, I saw her in passing. Brief nods, small hellos. Sometimes she carried a paper grocery bag, like she didn't trust plastic to hold what she needed. Sometimes she came home with her shoulders slightly hunched, like the world outside had been too loud. Sometimes late at night I heard her keys in the lock. An old sound, not the beep of a fob. I never saw anyone with her, but I heard once. Through the thin walls of the stairwell, a quiet laugh, brief, surprising like a light, turned on and off before you could get used to it. And then for weeks, nothing. That's what Harrogate was like, a building full of moments you almost missed. On the day I found the brass key, winter had been trying to become spring, the kind of day where sunlight shows up, like it's testing the place, and the wind still cuts through your jacket to remind you not to trust it. I climbed 25D with my toolbox in one hand and a folded work order in the other. The 5th floor hallway was too warm because the heat always worked everywhere except where it was supposed to. 5D belonged to Alina and her son Eli. Alina was maybe 30, but she carried her body like someone older. Her hair was always in a messy bun. She wore the same soft, faded sweatshirt like it was armor. She opened the door before I even knocked. Eyes tired but grateful. Thank you for coming, she said, immediately stepping aside. It's freezing in here at night. Eli keeps waking up behind her. Her son sat cross-legged on the couch, with a blanket wrapped around his shoulders like a cape. He held a comic book close to his face. Pretending not to listen, I went to the radiator. Put my hand on it cold. I checked the valve fine. I opened the little bleed screw and listened. No hiss, no air release, nothing. I frowned and stood. Boilers, sending heat to the line, but this unit isn't pulling it. Alina sighed like that sentence carried her whole life. Is that expensive, she asked. I looked at her, at the worry in her eyes. The way her fingers twisted the hem of her sweatshirt. It shouldn't be, I said. I'll get it fixed, she nodded too fast. Okay, sorry. There was that word again, sorry. I squatted by the radiator and started checking for a blockage. While I worked, I heard the soft shuffle of Eli's feet as he approached. He stood beside me watching. Are you like a building doctor? He asked. I smiled without looking up. Something like that. Can you fix anything? He asked. I thought about my own apartment. Small studio on the ground floor behind the office. I thought about the cracked mirror I'd been meaning to replace for months, the broken kitchen drawer that stuck so badly I'd stopped using it. I thought about my sister's last voicemail that I never replied to. No, I said softly, not anything. Eli seemed to accept that. He nodded as if that was a reasonable limitation for a human being. Then he pointed at my key. Why do you have so many keys? Because everyone else loses theirs, I said. Alina gave a tired laugh. And for a second the room felt warmer. I fixed the blockage, old sediment in the line. And the radiator started to cough warmth again. Alina's shoulders dropped, as if she'd been holding them up all winter. "Thank you," she said again. More quietly, "I really appreciate it." I nodded, packing up my tools. "If it acts up again, let me know." Eli held up his comic. "Do you want to see my favorite page?" I leaned in for a second. It was a panel of a superhero, holding up a collapsing bridge. People running beneath unaware. "It's cool," Eli said. "He saves everyone." I looked at the picture a moment longer than I needed to, then I stood. "Yeah," I said. "That's cool." I left. 5D with warmth on my hands and something heavier in my chest. Back downstairs, the lobby was quiet, and the space where the brass key had been still felt occupied that night. After I finished emergency calls and took out the overflowing trash, I sat in the tiny office behind the lobby, eating microwave noodles from a paper cup. On the desk, a pile of packages waited for residents who worked late. I was halfway through my noodles when the lobby door opened, footsteps not rushed, not hesitant, measured. I looked up expecting a tenant. Instead, it was Mr. Soto from A. Mr. Soto was in his 70s, always wore a clean coat, always carried himself like his spine refused to surrender to age. He approached the office window and tapped gently on the glass. "Martin," he said. "Are you busy?" I set my fork down. "Not too busy, what's up?" He held up a small wooden box. "A tea box, maybe. Could you help me with something?" I opened the office door and stepped out. "Sure." Mr. Sato led me to the lobby bench and opened the box carefully. Inside was a music box, old, delicate, the kind with a tiny cylinder and metal teeth that made a tune when you turned the crank. "It belonged to my wife," he said. I waited with Mr. Sato. "You had to?" He didn't rush. His words arrived when they were ready. "It stopped," he said, looking down at it like it had betrayed him. "I have tried, it does not sing." I knelt beside him. "May I?" He nodded. I examined the mechanism. A loose screw, dust in the gears. Nothing dramatic. I took out a small screwdriver from my pocket, because I always had one, and tightened the screw. Cleaned the dust with the edge of my sleeve. Then I gently turned the crank. A thin, delicate melody filled the lobby. Soft as breath, Mr. Sato's face changed, not into a smile, into something more private. His eyes glistened, but he blinked it away quickly, like tears were an indecent thing to show a stranger. "Thank you," he said. "It was just a screw," I replied. He looked at me. "No." He said very quietly, "It was not." He closed the box and held it against his chest, like a living thing. Then, before he left, he asked, "Do you still live in the little unit near the office?" "Yeah," I said. "You are always here," he observed. I gave a small shrug. "Part of the job." Mr. Sato nodded, but his gaze lingered, like he wanted to say something else. Instead, he said, "Good night, Martin." When he walked away, I sat back on my heels. I realized something then. People didn't call me because I was skilled. They called because I was present. And presence in a place like Harrogate was rarer than warm radiators. 2 days after the key incident, Nora knocked on the office door. Not on her own door, not in the hallway. My office door. It was evening. The lobby lights were dim. The building settled into its nighttime rhythm. Televisions murmuring behind walls, pipes ticking as the heat cycled, distant elevator doors sliding open and closed, like slow breaths. I opened the office door and found her standing there with her tote bag and a paper envelope in her hands. She looked like she hadn't slept. "Hi," she said. "Hey," I replied, stepping aside. "You okay?" Nora hesitated, then walked in. My office was small and cluttered. Tools, spare parts, a dusty fan, a chair with a rip in the fabric. It smelled faintly of metal and instant coffee. Nora stood near the desk, eyes scanning, like she was searching for the right place to set herself down. Finally, she held out the envelope. "This is for you." I stared at it. "For me, yes," she said quickly, then slower, as if she was forcing the words to behave. I wanted to thank you for the key. You don't have to, I know. She interrupted, then winced as if the interruption embarrassed her. I know you don't have to, but I wanted to. I took the envelope. It was light paper inside. I opened it carefully. Inside was a small card, plain with neat handwriting. Thank you for being kind when you didn't have to be. That was all. No name. No flourish. I looked up at her. Nora's eyes darted away. It sounds stupid, she said. You found it. It's not like you did anything. I did do something, I said softly. She blinked. You handed it back. Yes, I said. That's something. Nora's mouth tightened, like she didn't know what to do with that. We stood there at the office, quiet around us. Then Nora said, barely audible, it was my father's key. I didn't speak. I didn't ask questions, I just listened. He died, she continued, staring at the floor as if it held the rest of the story. A year and a half ago, he owned a storage unit, just a small one. Nothing important, but he always carried that key on that ribbon. Her voice wavered slightly on the word, always. When he was in the hospital, she said, he told me to take it. And I did. I put it away. I told myself I'd go there. I told myself I'd deal with it. She inhaled, shaky. But I never did, she admitted. And I don't know why I tied it to that ribbon. I think I wanted it to look less like a key, less like a responsibility. She finally looked at me. What if there's nothing in there? She asked. What if there's something and I don't want it? What if I open it and it's just proof that he's gone, and that I waited too long to be his daughter in the right way? The room felt smaller, not because of walls, because of how much grief she had carried. In silence, I swallowed. Do you want to go? I asked. Nora's brow furrowed. Go where? To the storage unit, one said. Open it. Her eyes widened. Why would you? Because you're standing in my office, holding a story that's hurting you, I said, voice calm. And you don't have to carry it alone. If you don't want to. Nora stared at me, like I'd spoken in a language she wasn't fluent in. Martin, she whispered. You don't even know me, I nodded. I know. A long pause. Then she looked down at her hands. I don't have anyone, she said, like it was an apology. The words hit me harder than they should have, because I knew that sentence. I lived inside it. I leaned back against the desk. I can come with you, I said again. Not as anything. Just as someone who can stand next to you while you open a door. Nora's throat moved. She blinked fast finally. She nodded once. Okay, she said, voice small. Okay, and in that moment, I realized the key had found me, because Nora had been waiting for permission. Not permission from me, permission from life, to finally turn it. We went on Saturday morning. Not because it was convenient. Nothing emotional ever is. Because it was the first day Nora didn't have to work, and because she looked like if she postponed it again, she might never go. The storage facility was on the edge of the city, in one of those areas where buildings look temporary and the sky always feels bigger. Rows of metal doors, concrete floors, security cameras that watch like bored eyes. Nora walked beside me, hands shoved deep in her coat pockets. The ribboned key was in her fist. Have you been here before? I asked. She shook her head. He never brought me. He always said it was just tools. Maybe it is, I said. Nora let out a humorless breath. If it's just tools, why does it feel like I'm walking to an execution? I didn't answer that. We found the unit number on a faded paper. Nora had brought a document she'd almost thrown away but couldn't. The door was scuffed. A small padlock hung there. Old and stubborn. Nora stared at it like it might speak. First, I stood slightly back. Giving her space, she lifted the key. Her hand shook, then she paused, looked at me and said, if I cry, can you not say anything? I nodded. I can do that, she swallowed. Then slid the key into the padlock. It turned with a click that sounded louder than it should have. The lock dropped into her palm. Nora didn't move, she just held it, staring. Then she reached for the metal door handle and pulled upward. The door rolled up with a scraping groan. Cold air spilled out, smelling like dust and thyme. Inside the unit was half full. There were boxes stacked neatly, a folded table, a couple of tool cases, like her father had said, and in the back, covered with a sheet, was something tall and rectangular. Nora stepped in slowly, like she was entering a room where someone might still be waiting. She moved to the nearest box and crouched. Her fingers traced the tape. She looked over her shoulder at me. "Should I open them?" I nodded. "Only if you want to." Nora stared at the box a long moment, then tore the tape with sudden force, like she was ripping a bandage. Inside were photo albums. She froze. She lifted one carefully and opened it. For several minutes she didn't speak. I stood near the entrance, watching her shoulders rise and fall. Finally she whispered, "He kept them." I took a step closer, still not invading her space. Nora turned a page. There was a picture of her as a child, missing front teeth, laughing. A picture of her father, holding her on his shoulders at some fair. A picture of her mother, young, smiling, alive. Nora's breath hitched. "I thought he threw them away," she said, voice cracking. "After Mom left, he always acted like it didn't matter, like none of it mattered." She turned another page. Her finger hovered over a photo where her father looked straight at the camera, expression soft, like he didn't know he was allowed to be seen that way. Then Nora's shoulders started to shake. She pressed her hand over her mouth, trying to keep the sound inside. I remembered what she'd asked, so I didn't speak. I just moved closer and sat down on the concrete floor near the entrance, facing outward, giving her privacy while still being there. Minutes past, the facility outside was quiet. Only occasional footsteps from distant units, metal doors rolling, someone's radio playing faintly. Nora sniffed, wiped her face, then opened another box. Inside were letters, stacks of them, all addressed to her but never sent. Nora stared at the handwriting, her eyes wide with disbelief. She picked up the first one, hands trembling. She didn't read it out loud. She didn't have to. Her face told the story: confusion, hurt, recognition, regret. She set it down and picked up another and another. Then she laughed once, sharp, broken. "He wrote to me," she whispered. "He wrote to me, and he never gave them." I finally spoke gently. "Maybe he didn't know how." Nora shook her head violently. "He always knew how to fix things." She said. "He fixed everything. Our sink, our porch steps, my bike chain. He could fix anything." Her voice rose, then fell. "Except us." I watched her sit there, among boxes of love that arrived too late. And I understood something I hadn't expected to, because I've been doing the same thing in my own way, fixing everyone else's broken things so I wouldn't have to face my own. Nora wiped her cheeks again and stood, moving toward the sheet-covered object in the back. She gripped the sheet edge, hesitated, then pulled it off. A small upright piano stood there, old, scuffed but cared for, on the music stand. There was a single folded piece of paper. Nora unfolded it, her eyes moved across the words. Then she pressed the paper to her chest and closed her eyes. "What is it?" I asked softly. Nora's voice was barely a breath. "It's a note." She opened her eyes and looked at me, like the building might collapse if she spoke too loudly. "It says," she whispered, "if you're reading this, you finally came. I'm proud of you." Silence filled the unit. I felt something tighten behind my ribs. Nora laughed again, but this time it was softer, almost tender. "Of course," she said. "Of course he'd make it about being proud of me. Like I'm still 12. She wiped her face. "He knew," she whispered. "He knew I'd be scared." I nodded. "He knew you." Nora stared at the piano. "I don't play," she said. I tilted my head. "Did he?" She swallowed. "He tried. After Mom left, he used to tell me he wanted music in the house again, but he never got good. He just kept trying." Nora sat down on the piano bench. Her hands hovered over the keys without touching them, like she was waiting for permission from the room, like she was afraid that if she made a sound, something inside her would answer back. Then very slowly, she pressed one key. A single note rang out thin, Imperfect but real. Nora pressed another. Then another, not a song. Just proof that sound could still exist. After silence, she stayed there a long time. Shoulders slightly rounded, staring at the keys as if they held a language. She'd forgotten how to speak. The storage unit felt colder than it had a moment ago, not because the air changed, because she did. I stayed near the entrance, sitting on the concrete like a guard who didn't know what he was guarding. Not the boxers, not the piano, just the fragile moment itself. When Nora finally stood, her face looked different. Not healed, but less haunted. She gathered the letters and photo albums into a box and taped it shut with hands that still trembled. Only not as badly. I can't take everything today, she said quietly, but I can take something. I nodded. That's enough. She glanced back at the piano. The old wood was scuffed, the keys were yellowed. It looked like something that had waited a long time, without expecting anyone to return. What do I do with it? She asked. I shrugged lightly, like the answer didn't matter. As much as the fact that she was asking. You could leave it here. Nora frowned. That feels wrong. Then donate it, I suggested. Someone might. To who? She asked, and there it was again. That edge of panic that wasn't really anger. It was fear wearing a sharper coat. I thought of Harrogate, the lobby. That always felt like it wanted to be a community, but didn't know how. The place where everyone passed each other like strangers on the same escalator. The bench by the window where people waited for rides they didn't want to admit they couldn't afford. The mailboxes full of unopened envelopes. The potted plant that never grew. I thought of Eli and his superhero comic. The way he looked at the world like it could still be saved. I thought of Mr. Sato's music box. The way one small melody had made him look 10 years younger and 10 years older at the same time. There's space in the lobby, I said slowly. That corner by the window. People wait there sometimes. Could be something. Nora stared at me. A piano in a lobby. I nodded. Why not? She let out a breath that almost became a laugh. Because it's weird. Weird might be good, I said. Nora looked at the piano again. Like she was trying to imagine it somewhere else. Like she was trying to imagine her father's grief turning into something that didn't only hurt. Then she nodded once. Okay, she said, let's do something weird. Moving a piano is not romantic. It's heavy, awkward, and full of swears you don't want to say in front of security cameras. We hired a small moving crew. I offered to split it, but Nora paid anyway. She insisted, with a stubbornness that felt like reclaiming control, like this was one thing she could do cleanly, correctly, without asking anyone to carry it for her. When the piano arrived at Harrogate, it took 3 men, a wheel dolly, and a kind of focused silence that only comes when people are trying not to break something valuable. Tenants paused in the lobby to stare. Someone muttered, "What the hell?" Nora stood off to the side with her arms folded tight, cheeks flushed, pretending she didn't care what anyone thought, but her eyes kept flicking toward the door, like she was ready to bolt if someone laughed too loudly. I caught her gaze. She looked terrified. I gave a small nod that said, "We're doing it anyway." The movers maneuvered the piano into the corner by the window, the one spot in the lobby that caught the weak afternoon light. When they finally set it down and stepped back, the piano looked oddly right there, like the building had been missing that shape. Nora stood in front of it, hands at her sides, jaw tight. "I don't know what I'm doing," she said quietly. "Neither does anyone," I replied. She let out a small, reluctant smile. It appeared for a second, then she swallowed it back down, like she didn't trust happiness to stay. She reached into her tote and pulled out a piece of paper, one of her father's notes, copied onto a clean sheet in her neat, controlled handwriting. She taped it to the wall above the piano. "If you need a moment, take one here." Then below it, she added another line. "Play if you want, or don't." She stepped back. The lobby went quiet, like the building itself had paused to read it. Even the elevator seemed to wait. Nora's shoulders rose and fell, once heavy, then she turned and walked away, as if staying would make it too real. That night during my rounds, I kept glancing at the piano, like it might move on its own, like it might start playing in the empty lobby, the way grief sometimes plays in your head when you're trying to sleep. Around 9, I saw someone sitting on the bench. It was Jules from 7C. Jules had the kind of tired that lived in her posture. Her hair always smelled faintly like hospital soap. She usually came home when the rest of the building was asleep, keys quiet, footsteps soft, like she didn't want to wake the world. Now she sat at the piano bench, staring at the keys. She didn't play, she just sat, hands in her lap, looking at the piano like it was an open door. She didn't know if she was allowed to enter. Then she pressed one key softly, a single note. She exhaled like she'd been holding her breath all day. Then she stood and walked away without looking back, leaving the sound hanging in the air like a question no one answered out loud. The next day, Eli from 5D found the piano. He climbed onto the bench like it was a jungle gym and banged out something that barely resembled music, grinning like he discovered a secret tunnel inside the building. Alina rushed down after him, mortified. "I'm so sorry," she said, grabbing for his shoulder. "Don't," I told her. "Let him." Alina blinked at me, surprised by the firmness in my voice. Eli pressed another cluster of keys. "Delighted it's loud," he announced as if loudness was proof of life. Mr. Cito came down that evening and sat near the piano, with his music box closed in his pocket. He watched Eli play like he was watching a bird learn to fly, messy, fearless, unaware of the adults trying not to cry. Slowly the lobby changed, not into some magical community where everyone hugged and shared casserole. Real life didn't do that, but people paused more. They lingered, they nodded at each other. Sometimes they even spoke. A woman from 4F, who had never met Alina, offered Eli a sticker. A man from 2C held the door open for Mr. Sato. Without being asked, Jules started coming through the lobby instead of the side entrance, like she wanted to be seen, without having to explain herself. And Nora started coming downstairs more often at first. She walked past the piano quickly, like she didn't want to be associated with it, like she was afraid someone would connect it to her and ask questions she couldn't answer without breaking. Then she started stopping. Then she started sitting on the bench and turning the pages of a beginner piano book she'd bought. She decided that if the piano was going to exist in the lobby, it would exist with purpose. One evening I found her there, fingers hovering. "You're really going to learn?" I said, Nora startled, then relaxed when she saw it was me. "I don't know if I can." "You can," I said. "It's just practice." She gave a dry smile. "That's easy for you to say. You fix things." I leaned against the wall. "I fix pipes. That's not the same." Nora stared at the keys. "It feels like if I learn, it becomes real, like he's really gone. And this is what's left me trying." Her voice softened. "And if I don't learn, then I wasted it." I watched her for a moment. This woman who had carried a key like a stone in her pocket for a year and a half, who had opened a storage door and found the proof of love that arrived too late. Then I said, "You didn't ask for him to die. You didn't ask for letters you never got. You don't owe the universe a perfect response." Nora's eyes flicked to me. "You talk like you've thought about that." I almost laughed because the truth was too close. "Instead," I said, "I've thought about a lot of things at night." Nora nodded slowly, like she believed that, without needing details. She pressed a key, then another, a clumsy 3-note pattern. She grimaced. "That sounds terrible." "It sounds like beginning," I said. Nora sat back and exhaled. Then, without looking at me, she asked, "Do you ever feel like you're the only person holding things together?" The question landed quietly, but it landed. I looked at the lobby, at the piano, at the mailboxes, at the bench where people now sometimes sat. I thought about Alina's exhaustion, Mr. Sito's grief, Jules's loneliness. I thought about my own nights, alone in the little unit near the office, fixing imaginary problems in my head because real ones didn't come with instruction manuals. "Yes," I admitted. Nora nodded once, like she'd expected that answer. "Me too," she said. And for the first time, it felt like we were two people in the same room, not just 2 lives passing in a hallway. The notice came on a Tuesday. It was taped to the lobby bulletin board with clear tape that curled at the edges, like even the building didn't want to keep it there. Building inspection, upcoming ownership transfer. Please read ownership transfer. That phrase made my stomach drop. Before I even knew why, I pulled the paper down and read it twice. The landlord, the one who never showed up unless money was involved, was selling Harrogate. A new company would take over in 60 days. All leases would be reviewed. Maintenance operations would be restructured. Corporate language for people like me would become a line item to remove. I stood there in the lobby, paper trembling slightly in my hand. Behind me, the elevator dinged and someone walked out, talking on the phone, laughing. Normal life, meanwhile. I could feel the floor tilt under me. I went into the office and called the landlord. He didn't answer. I left a message. No reply. I called again. Nothing that afternoon. I told myself not to panic. Maybe it wouldn't be bad. Maybe they'd keep me. Maybe they'd offer me a contract. But I'd been around long enough to know how this worked. A new company doesn't keep the old building's heart. It replaces it with a cheaper machine. That evening, Nora came into the lobby carrying a small grocery bag. She stopped when she saw my face. "What's wrong?" she asked immediately. I hesitated, then I handed her the notice. Nora read it, her brow knitting tighter with each line. "Oh," she said softly. I nodded, swallowing. "Yeah." She looked up at me. "Does that mean you'll have to leave?" "I don't know," I said. But my voice didn't convince either of us. Nora's fingers tightened around the paper. "But you, I'm just maintenance," I said, sharper than I meant to. Nora flinched. I exhaled, regretting it instantly. "Sorry. I don't know yet." Nora's eyes flicked to the piano, to the note she'd taped above it, to the small moments the lobby had started holding. Her voice lowered. "They can't just change everything." "They can," I said quietly. "That's what they do." Nora handed the notice back, hands shaking. "What will you do?" she asked. I stared at the paper like it might offer options. "I don't know," I admitted. And this time the words felt like a confession. That night I couldn't sleep. Not because of noise, the building was unusually quiet. Because my mind kept walking through all the things I'd built here, without realizing I was building them. I thought I was invisible. But invisibility had become my home. If the building sold, I'd lose my job. And if I lost my job, I'd lose the unit. And if I lost the unit, I'd be a man with a toolbox and no place to put it. At 2 a.m, my phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number at first. Then I saw the name Leah, my sister. I stared at it, heart thudding like it wanted to escape my chest. I hadn't talked to Leah in almost 2 years, not because of some dramatic fight, because of a slow, mutual drift fueled by my own stubborn silence. The message read, "Dad's birthday is next week. I'm going to his grave if you want to come meet me at 10. My mouth went dry. Dad had been gone 5 years. Leah and I had gone together the first 2 birthdays. Then I stopped answering her messages, because I didn't know how to talk about grief without turning it into something practical, something fixable. I stared at my phone until the screen dimmed. Then I turned it over and lay in the dark, listening to the building breathe. I thought about Nora's letters written unsent. I thought about my own silence, unwritten, unanswered. I thought about the notice on the bulletin board and how easily a place could be taken away when you assumed it would always be there. At 3 a.m. I sat up, grabbed my phone and typed "OK. I'll be there." I stared at the message before sending, like it might explode. Then I hit send. For a long time nothing happened. Then Leah replied, "Good." Just one word, but it felt like a door cracking open. I lay back down, heart heavy, and realized the building wasn't the only thing about to change. After the notice, people started talking. Not loudly, not in dramatic meetings in hallways near the mailboxes. By the lobby, piano. Will rent go up? Will they renovate? Will they kick people out? Will they get rid of the piano? That last one came from Eli. Horrified, Alina tried to calm him. It's just a piano, honey. But Eli shook his head violently. It's not just a piano, and for once, he was right. Nora started leaving little notes on the bulletin board, practical things written in that neat hand, like she could organize chaos into order. Call this number for tenant rights info. Here's the inspection date. If you need help reading the paperwork, ask people who never spoke to each other. Started asking questions. Mr. Sato offered to translate for someone whose English wasn't strong. Jules printed out forms between shifts. Alina brought coffee down one morning and set it on the lobby table with paper cups, saying, "It's not much, but take one." I watched it happen, like I was watching a plant grow in real time. The building wasn't becoming a family, but it was becoming aware of itself. One evening, I found Nora by the piano again, tapping out a simple melody with one finger slow. Hesitant but recognizable. "Is that?" I asked. Nora nodded without looking up. "It's a song my dad used to hum when he fixed things." My throat tightened. "It's good." "It's not good," she said, pressing another key. "It's just something." I leaned against the wall, watching her. After a moment, she said quietly, "Do you want to play?" I almost laughed. "I don't know how, neither do I," she replied. She scooted over on the bench, making space. The invitation felt bigger than it should have. I hesitated, then sat down beside her. The keys were cool under my fingertips. Nora pointed to the middle. "Just press anything," she said. One note. I looked at her. "Why?" "Because," she said, voice steady, "sometimes you have to make a sound just to prove you're here." I swallowed. Then I pressed a key. A single note rang out. Nora pressed another next to it. Together, it sounded almost like a question and an answer. We sat there for a minute, pressing random notes, awkward and quiet. Then Nora laughed softly. I looked at her, surprised. Her laugh wasn't sharp like before. It was a light for a moment. The building around us didn't feel like a collection of separate lives. It felt like a place, a real one. Then Nora's laughter faded, and she asked almost casually, "If they make you leave, where will you go?" The question hit me like cold air. I stared at the keys. "I don't know." I admitted. "You can't just disappear." She said. I wanted to tell her I'd been disappearing my whole life. Instead, I said, "It happens." Nora shook her head, anger flashing briefly. "It shouldn't." I looked at her, then really looked, the tired strength in her eyes, the way she held herself like she was always bracing. She wasn't just asking about my job. She was asking about the small, steady presence she'd come to rely on. And I realized with a strange ache that I'd come to rely on hers too. Nora exhaled slowly. "I was thinking after the inspection, maybe we could have something here in the lobby." "What kind of something?" I asked. She shrugged, cheeks flushing. "I don't know. A little gathering just to mark it before it changes." I pictured it, people awkwardly holding paper cups, standing near the mailboxes, pretending not to feel sentimental. Then I pictured the alternative. Everyone silently packing up one by one, without acknowledging what they'd shared. "Yeah," I said, "we should." Nora nodded. "Okay." She pressed a key again, softer this time, like sealing the idea into the air.